Dear Dad, so Mom told me that you have decided to support the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida that recently passed. I want to explain, or at least try to explain, why this bill and the bills like it are so dangerous. So I'm not going to read the bill to you. I think that you can read it yourself, but I'm going to go kind of section by section and explain what I think is wrong with this bill. So section one, right? It seems like it's an innocuous, you know, set of rules, but what it really does is create an environment where teachers and administrators would be required to disclose a kid's sexuality or gender identity to the parent. And I think you know that like there are a lot of reasons why a kid might not feel comfortable coming out to their parents. I think you know that the LGBTQ population makes up a much higher percentage of the youth homeless population than non or than heterosexual kids. I think there's a statistic that it's like 1 in 4 queer kids winds up being forced to leave their home after they come out. So I mean, there are a lot of reasons why a kid might not feel comfortable talking to their parents about something. Like I had a good home and even I wasn't comfortable, coming out to you all. I talked to a lot of people before I talked to you all. Because that's just how kids are. They're not always going to want to talk to their parents. And quite frankly, their parents aren't always the best person to talk to. Um, and I think you know that. And so that's one reason why, that section is dangerous. And leading into that, section two really takes it a step further, Dad, by putting into law that schools aren't allowed to create pathways for students to confide in teachers that would allow schools to keep that information private from the parents unless there's obvious evidence that doing so would result in abuse, abandonment, and neglect. And like, Dad, you used to be a cop, and so I know that you know that not all abuse is evident. It's not obvious. But the problem is with this bill is that unless a teacher can prove the abuse, they wouldn't be able to keep what that student told them private. They would have to disclose it to the parents. And that puts kids in danger because not all parents are as accepting as you and Mom were. And I think that this just puts kids at a disadvantage and it makes them less safe. Um, and the thing is like we're not just talking about kids confiding in teachers either. Like I can imagine situations where the sponsor of a gay straight alliance club at school overhears one of their kids saying that they think they might be gay but haven't told their parents. Under this bill, that teacher could reasonably be held responsible for not informing the parents. Or if a librarian noticed a student checking out a lot of books about gender identity issues, that librarian could be held responsible if they didn't tell the kid's parents. And I know that like those are slippery slope arguments, Dad, and you probably think they're extreme, and maybe they are, but I always have to look at, like we always have to look at like what can happen. Like if a librarian or a teacher is forced to disclose something about a kid and then that kid gets hurt or kicked out or abandoned by their parents, like then we failed to protect that kid, right? And even if those extreme things don't happen, what's most likely is that young people at schools are going to feel less safe confiding in adults. And they won't do so even when they should. And then school officials are going to become so scared of being sued that they'll either make sure that young people know that they are not safe to confide in, or they'll reveal every single thing a young person tells them out of an overabundance of caution. So, it's in other words, this bill aims to make it so that teens feel that the only safe people to talk to are their parents. but it absolutely fails to take into account the number of parents who simply are not safe. I don't know if you know the statistic, Dad, but one one young queer kid tries to attempt suicide in the United States every 45 seconds. And the thing is, Dad, you have firsthand knowledge of this, right? You know what it's like to get that call. You know what it's like to see your gay kid in a hospital room because you tried to end his life. Your family, our family, is one of those statistics. And like I said, by any measure, I grew up in a pretty supportive family. So I want you to imagine what it's like for the queer kids whose families aren't as supportive. Imagine one of them turning to someone at school who might help them, only be turned away or outed to their parents against their will. I mean, imagine doing something, betraying that kid who's already in a fragile state. So I'm going to move on to the third section, and I know this is the section that you mentioned was the reason you thought that this was a good bill, and it's the section that most of the supporters talk about. And the reason that they talk about this section, and this is the section that says that they don't want, that is barring instruction of gender issues or sexual orientation from kindergarten through third grade. The reason that they are pushing this section is that they want to make you think that this entire bill is about protecting kids, and that anyone who's against this bill is a pervert and a pedophile who is just grooming young children. And before I go on, I want you to know that, yeah, that's what they call me, Dad. Just this morning, in case you were wondering. And I have been called those names because I write books that help gay kids understand who they are. And third graders aren't reading my books. My books are written for high school, and they're still calling me those names. But anyway, let's get back to the kindergarten through third grade thing. Because here's what's real, is no one is offering sex education to kindergarten classes. The word instruction is really vague. Is a gay teacher allowed to mention their spouse? Is a transgender teacher allowed to tell the students that they're transgender? If a transgender teacher transitions over the summer and the students notice, is the teacher allowed to explain? Or do they have to pretend that they have no idea what the students are talking about when they ask? Because that's how vague it is. And again, the people who support this will say, oh, that's never going to happen. But it will. You know it will. It absolutely will. Because we're not that far off from, queer teachers and transgender teachers being fired for coming out. All those scare reports on Fox News want you to believe that there are hordes of teachers out there who want to teach kindergarten through third graders all about graphic sex and shoot them up with hormones. But it's bullshit, Dad. And I think you know that. At least I hope you know that. But the vagueness of this bill would create a chilling effect that would ensure transgender or queer teachers who deal with students in kindergarten through third grade never, ever feel comfortable being themselves. A gay teacher would remove their wedding band or not keep a picture of their spouse on their desk, and they would never talk about their families. This is not a problem heterosexual teachers have. No one bats an eye if Mrs. Smith mentions her husband, but if Mrs. Smith mentions her wife, there could absolutely be parents who would claim that that mention counts as instruction. And so Mrs. Smith probably won't ever mention having a wife because she needs the job and she can't afford to lose it. But beyond that is the even more vague wording of the section, where it says, in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. So what does that mean, Dad? Because that section applies to grades 4 through 12. And it's so freaking vague that parents can claim anything they don't like isn't age or developmentally appropriate. And then they can use this bill to sue schools. The effect of that is that teachers and school administrators will simply eliminate anything having to do with non-heterosexual sexuality and gender identity from the curriculum in order to avoid upsetting parents. Like, you think I'm being like extreme or hyperbolic, but there are already high schools that refuse to buy my books or any books with gay characters because they're scared of pushback from parents. It's a type of silent censorship, and it happens all the time. This bill is only going to increase the pressure on schools and teachers not to include anything in the curriculum that might offend any parent. Now, I know that like the shows that you watch, the people on Fox News or the people who support this bill are going to tell you that that's not what they want. They're just trying to protect kids. But the thing is this is exactly what they want, Dad. They want queer students to keep it to themselves, to stay in the closet, to feel like they have no one to talk to so that they won't come out. And they want teachers to be so afraid for their jobs that they never ever mention any LGBTQIA plus topics, even if those topics pertain to them personally, or if talking about them might help a student. The whole concept that they think that just being not heterosexual, that being transgender is somehow explicit, it's sexually explicit in some way, is ridiculous. Because you can talk about being gay without talking about sex, right? And how is talking about being transgender any different from talking about being cisgender? I mean, it's not. There's nothing explicit about it. There's nothing in there that children don't understand. So then there are other sections in there, and the one that I think that is also very harmful is Section 5, and basically it gives parents the rights to access their children's health records, to decline any health services offered by the school. And again, I think that this is a dangerous sort of thing because, what if there is a kid who has some mental health issues and their parents refuse counseling because they think that, the only therapist a kid really needs is Jesus? Under this bill, schools would have no option to offer that kid services if his parents didn't want it. So a kid like me who had depression wouldn't be able to get the help they need. And I don't know. Do you really think that a kid in crisis should be denied mental health care because their parents are religious? I mean, you can argue it's the parents' decision, and I get that, but at the end of the day, you're putting a child's life at risk. So then most of the rest of the bill really just describes the ways that parents can sue the schools and can go after the schools and seek remedy for any violations of this bill. And of course, that's where the real power is, because what they can do is they can scare a school into doing what they want just by threatening lawsuits, because schools don't have the money or time to constantly defend themselves from lawsuits. So they will ensure that their teachers just don't do anything that might even come close to upsetting a parent. So my question to you, Dad, is what problem you think this bill is actually solving? Like I said, you told Mom that you agree kids in kindergarten through third grade shouldn't be learning sex education. And like, if that's literally all you care about, well, this bill doesn't do that. This bill specifically targets sexual orientation and gender identity. I don't know if you know this, but Democrat lawmakers attempted to add amendments to the bill that would prohibit discussions of sexual activity rather than specifically sexual orientation or gender identity. And Republican lawmakers voted it down. Additionally, like they talk about what is age appropriate, and the Florida state statutes, educational statutes, already include language that require any type of sex education to be age appropriate. So I don't get what you think that this bill is doing, because it's not doing the things that you say it is. I don't know if you know this, Dad, though I hope you do, but I wrote a memoir called Brave Face. And it was all about how I didn't have any role models as a young queer person, and how I struggled to see people like me, and how that struggle led to my attempt to end my life. And I wrote about my experiences in an effort to make sure that kids today growing up wouldn't face that kind of struggle, that I wanted to make sure that they knew they weren't alone. And that's the same reason I write all my books. I want queer youth to know they have a place in this world, that they have a future, that they can be anything that they want. I don't want them to get to the same place that I got to. And the problem is that right now, this bill is part of this massive wave. Um, I don't know how much you know, but there has been so many people trying to ban my books recently, trying to ban all books that have any kind of queer content in it. Um, People are challenging Braveface. They're they're challenging it and calling me a pervert and a pedophile for writing about my experiences. When I hear when I hear supporters talk about this bill, all I can think is that they would be happier if queer people didn't exist at all. I'm pretty sure that the people supporting this bill would be happier if I didn't exist. Is that who you are, Dad? Someone who wishes I didn't exist? I really hope not. Look, Dad, I know that you love me, and I know that you support me, but I mean, I'm grown up. I don't really need your support anymore. But there are a lot of queer kids out there who aren't as fortunate as I was, and they do need your support. They need your support far more than some bill that will make them more vulnerable and less safe. They need to know that they matter. They need to know that you support the educators who can create safe spaces for them when the homes that they go to at the end of the day aren't safe. They need to know that they're seen and valued, so that their parents don't one day get the same call that you and Mom did about me. So look, I know, Dad, there's a lot of politics involved, and it's liberals versus conservatives, and we've fought about it, and but I also know who you are. At least I hope I do. And I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking you to be the person I know you can be. That's it. So